The limited partner shares in the potentially outsized returns of a well-planned and executed investment, but is a passive investor with no day-to-day operating requirements and whose liability is limited to the extent of their share of ownership. The limited partner has the maximum leverage on their most precious asset, their time. Now, they say you're the average of the people you surround yourself with. Are you looking to elevate your network? Connect with individuals that bring your average up? This is more than just a podcast. It's a community to learn, to participate, and to connect. There is no other community out there like this specifically for limited partners. So subscribe to the podcast, and most importantly, join the community at thelimitedpartner.com. Welcome. I'm your host, Jake Wiley. Welcome, partners. This is your host, Jake Wiley. This week, I'm joined by Lane Kawaoka of SimplePassiveCashflow.com. Lane, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jake. Aloha, everybody.
Aloha. So for those of you guys who can't see the video, Lane's obviously in Hawaii and it's a really early recording, but Lane, I'd love for you to give a little bit of background because you've got a great story of where you started and kind of how you ended up in kind of this passive investing world. Yeah.
So I kind of grew up on this linear path. I think a lot of us grew up on where you're taught to study hard, go to school, work at a job for 30, 40 years, invest in your 401k, max out your Roth, maybe mega backdoor Roth, all these kind of strange strategies that like the people who think that they're financial hackers do. But and again, buy a house to live in, right? I mean, that one's kind of also thrown in there too. So I kind of went to school to be an engineer, started to save my money. I was really frugal with my money. It's really good to save it. And I started to buy a house to live in, although I was never home all the time because I was away for work, as most, young professionals are. I was a construction supervisor at the time, traveling around. So I just decided to rent it out. This is well before, all the turtles in the world. This was around 2009 is when I bought my first rental. And then that was where I got the taste of cash flow. And I was like, shoot, if I just do this again and again, I'll be financially free. And 2015, I had 11 of these turnkey rentals. And that was kind of where my next pivot point was when I realized they just weren't scalable. That's not what accredited investors do.
So I guess let's talk about the next step then. So how did you tip into scalability?
Yeah. So after that point, I started to meet the right people, right? So from 2009 to 2015, I was just, saving money as a young kid, got up to accredited investor status and started to feel like there's something different, right? That was like the first chink in the armor. And then I started to find other high net worth accredited investors, they're doctors, lawyers, engineers, 10, 20 years older than I was. And I started to, build relationsship with them and started to kind of piece together this whole mystery and started to realize that the path forward was not going to be buying 40, 50 rental properties as I once thought. It was about putting my money in as a passive investor and going in as one of these larger deals out there. And that was also kind of where I started to discover, we kind of help people these days kind of see the real path forward, which is really not investing. Right? Like you don't need to make that much money investing. Just don't lose your money. But more importantly, the tax, the legal, the infinite banking, these other strategies that the wealthy implement that kind of augment the whole investing thing and kind of creates this whole full circle of, what accredited high net worth investors do is really the way to get financial stability and financial freedom and, kind of create that critical mass point where your money makes more money than you and you quit your job. That was kind of like my path forward from there.
Yeah, I think like you, I started with the single families and thought, hey, I can just keep doing this. This makes sense. It's simple. Like I understand what it's like to own a house, to rent a house, this makes a lot of sense, but you're right. It's just totally not scalable and it becomes a ton of work. And, one setback, quasi major setback in any of those properties, it really, really has an impact on the cash flow. And I think is we think about the listeners, they've probably heard me say this a million times, but The goal is to become a limited partner, right? To do this passively and to not just create another job, because a lot of people go out there and they do that, right? They think, well, I can get into real estate, and then it's like, well, I'll just buy some properties, and it's like, then you're a landlord. I guess what are your tips, for those that are looking to jump into the game now? What would you suggest? How would they get started?
Well, go buy a rental property first, buddy, right? Before you go buy a 100 unit. I mean, it depends who we're talking to, right? There's a variety of different characters that kind of run across. You got the guy who's been in successful business, probably has ability to operate. What I like about real estate is anybody can kind of do it, but that's the bad thing, right? There is a competition barrier right there. Unless you've done 100, 200 unit apartment complexes in the past, you don't have the broker relationships. You don't have the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac card to get your loans done. It's just not going to happen. It's an incredibly unfair game for somebody breaking into it. And, if you might have been successful in other avenues and definitely probably have the skill set to do it, but you may not have those specific building blocks necessary to kind of push through the beginning stages. And what I tell people, why I initially went down the limited partner path, my net worth was barely $1 million. I was in my kind of late 20s at the time. I was still saving pretty good money. And I just did the math. If I just increased my investments, increased by 12 to 14% per year, didn't pay too much taxes in there too, I would be financially free well before I was 35, 40, which did happen. And that was where I was like, well, why the hell would I want to be a general partner and take in all of the responsibility and trade my time for money? That's eventually what I did, right? For other reasons. But for most people, it just doesn't make sense. And what it boils down to is like an ego thing. I get it. People I want to be the man. And well, what do you want that, right? Do you really want that? Or do you just want it for the ego, the notoriety? But what do you really want, right? This is where I, kind of tell people all right, what's your goal? What net worth, what cash flow level, and what lifestyle does that buy? If that's the mere goal, why kind of stay on the bus, right? And this is a metaphor that I use many times. If you've ever ridden a bus line or a subway, everybody gets off the bus at some point. There is some goal, some destination you're trying to hit. Only the weirdos kind of stay to the end because they don't know what's going on, or they fall asleep. But don't be that weirdo who kind of just stays on the bus way too long just for the notoriety for it. Because, if you're past the age of 55, whatever, you probably understand that nobody cares, right? Nobody cares how far along on the bus line you got, that you were a syndicator of 2,000 units. That just kind of points to the maturation process of the individual, right? Define the rules of your game that you want to play and hit that. And most likely it's pretty damn easy to hit it as a passive investor, investing in good deals.
Right. Yeah. I think, the point being is there's some attraction to the potential upside of being the guy that's putting the deal together, right? But there's also a lot of risk. And I think that sidetracks people from their goals, right? It's like, well, hey, look, I could hit a home run on this project if I take it myself, or you could be a passive investor in another deal and make outsized returns, right? You're gonna do better most likely than you would if you were just investing in the stock market or hoping for the best in a 401k, like you mentioned before. And I think it's just about finding the right deals, finding the right partners, because too, when you find the right partners, they know what they're doing, right, and they know how to generate those returns for you. What are your thoughts on that?
Part of it is you don't trust anybody but yourself. And I was there at one time, right? But if you play nice with other passive investors, build colleagues, it's pretty easy to figure out who's legit in this passive investing world. I think going back to who has that mindset where they want to be the man, or the lady running the deal. It's typically people with their net worth is less than $1 million or a couple $1 million, which to me isn't that much money, or they make less than $80,000 a year. I think that's a big thing. Most of my folks, they make six figures and they're able to save at least $30,000 to $50,000 a year. If you're able to do that, you're going to be FI within the decade, more than likely. I'm sure there's ways to compress that, but being a general partner just doesn't make sense going down that path. And it comes down to what is your highest and best use. If you make a good living, especially if you're a doctor or you make over 200 grand a year, dude, just keep doing that. I mean, you don't have to do it for very much longer, but like, you just be smart with your money, invest in the right place, and you'll be FI. That's the goal, right? But I get it. I mean, your net worth dictates a lot of this behavior and how much money, your velocity, which is how much money you make minus how much you save. It's always a question I always ask in calls, like, what do you net? I don't care what you make. A lot of clients live in like San Francisco, make 300,000, 400,000, but they only save 30. I mean, nothing surprises me these days. But yeah, that velocity and where you are in terms of your net worth dictates a lot of this.
What about, let's talk about like a passive investor. So I think that a lot of the folks that I work with or have talked to, they're busy, like you mentioned, like they have a high paying job. They're probably putting a ton of hours in. They're looking for investments. And, I think that there's a lot of, let's just say you go to a financial advisor, like, just pick one. You just kind of like have a brief discussion with them, talk about some goals, and then they put you in some sort of matrix. And then like, that's it. You kind of wait and see. I think passive investing is different, right? You've got to do a little bit more diligence and research on the people that you're going to invest with. Like, what are some of the mistakes that you've seen people making?
Yeah, I mean, you're getting off the beaten path for sure, right? I mean, but the problem with the financial planner and all that stuff, yeah, it's consistent, but it's consistently bad where you're getting your money taken and all these super heavy fees, top of the line expenses. You're going to make higher returns when you get off the beaten path. But I think that the issue is investing or stepping on a landmine, right? Investing with the wrong people that just don't have the track record, experience, and know-how, or they're dishonest people. Trust me, I've been there. I've had a couple occasions where I lost my money with the wrong people because they just turned out to be shysters. And it's incredibly hard to find out who's legit in this world. I mean, I do this for a living, and sometimes I can't even tell who's legit. This is why I only kind of invest in myself for the people I know, like, and trust. And I don't branch off from there too much. But like, how are you going to find the new next up and coming talent? So you're just not stuck with the institutional players who just throw you into some blind pool fund where the returns are lower, even though they try and sell it on diversification. You've got to build relationships with other accredited high net worth investors, in a couple dozen of these deals too, and build organic relationships. And that's why, your network is your net worth. And some practical tips there. I mean, you got to get away from the real estate clubby world, the meetup world, the free online form world. I mean, that's just a bunch of like freeloaders, a bunch of guys who hear real estate is a get rich quick scheme. That's not where high net worth accredited investors are hanging out. That's not where you're going to be able to get an opportunity to build an organic relationship with them. And when you do somehow get in the room with other accredited investors, don't mess it up, right? I think when people kind of, do like some events where, we do set that situation up, and I tell people, like, don't be that person who just goes around and drops their shorts and says, who are you investing with? Tell me who your precious is, right? Like that, high net worth accredited investors, they already know who they're investing with. And I'll speak like for myself, like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to determine who do I want to create a personal long-term relationship. And part of the people I don't want to put into that category, people who are running around out asking for themselves. They're a taker. They're just looking for themselves. And yeah, they might be a kind, nice guy, but at the end of the day, they're kind of thinking about number one first, right? So what I tell people is, take it slow, do the courting process slowly. Even myself, right, with my closest peers and colleagues, we don't tell each other what we're investing in. Part of it is like, it's kind of like, I can do better than you. I don't know. There's some kind of unspoken gamesmanship, right? But we don't show each other's our spreadsheets of all the people and things we invest in and the ROI numbers. Just to me, I don't think that that's LP etiquette. And it can put a lot of people off is what I'm saying. I don't really care. But I've seen it put a lot of people off, and it kind of outs you as one of those takers. What I've seen is, you build a relationship over the years, and there might come an opportunity over drinks where you're like, well, who's been working and who's not? All right, cool. Now let's start talking about the important stuff with like, how are you working with your family to pass down this legacy wealth? Those more important things. Like I said, those are infinite banking, legal, taxes, and then family succession planning and more endgame investing is more important than what deal you're investing in. Because what deal you're investing in, although people listening may think otherwise, at some point becomes very easy to, you know who you're going to invest with at some point.
Well, you brought it up twice now, and I'm going to ask the question. So, of all the things you mentioned, infinite banking, I think people are going to have questions about what is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's using whole life overfunded insurance. That's the technology behind it. It's nothing fancy, but you're basically able to use a little tax loophole where they said that if you use life insurance, the gains from it can be tax free. That's a way you can like throw money in there and have it grow as you're waiting for your next deal, right? That's the place I put my cash value or my liquidity to build the cash value, so that when I do have a deal or two deals come up in a row, I can deploy my capital from that without it sitting in the bank making nothing. And then again, that a nice byproduct of that is when it's in life insurance, it's kind of protected, kind of like how your 401k is from creditors and litigators. But the biggest thing is like, again, that like, because it's life insurance per IRS code, it's tax free. So there's some tricks to that though. Like, people were like just getting a small amount of life insurance. Now the government's like, you have to have a certain amount, bare minimum, because we know what you guys are doing out there and you don't like it. So, but it's a commodity, right? You're going to like a lot of the larger companies like the Pens, the Guardians, these AAA rated companies, but you got to configure it right is the key. So, a lot of it has to do just with like how much your agent wants to sell you in commissions. They make money off the life insurance portion of it, but as you try to make it for this cash value, like capital source, you want that life insurance to be the least and the paid up additions to be the greatest. So most people, what I see, or most agents, what they do is they make it like a 70-30 split or 50-50 split, with 30% going to the insurance or the 50% going to insurance, because that's how they make money to put food on the table for their family. But it's the way I set it up personally is like 10, drive that all down to 10%, so it's a 90-10. So it's really easy to hit those mandatory premiums. And if you do a policy for 600,000 over 6 years, or $100,000 per year, 90% of that 600 grand is 60 grand. I mean, you've hit that minimum amount in the first year of funding. I mean, whereas if it was a 70-30 split or 50-50, it's much harder, and you should probably get anxious over that for hitting that number. This is a strategy that the wealthy does. I mean, it doesn't move the needle too much. And, I think like people geek out on this stuff a little bit too much, especially like if your net worth is under $1 million, like go make more money, go invest it first. But like after you've been investing and you've got your taxes game in order, this is kind of the third piece in that order, kind of start to implement this stuff. Because it's kind of, again, it doesn't move the needle too much, but it is, I think what most passive investors realize, if they're interacting with the right people, watching the right stuff, you can get to pretty good state, or like the minimum effective dose, in about a year or two, and then before it's to focus on these other things. And then that's what simple passive cash flow is all about. It's very simple, right? There's just a lot of other nonsense and garbage out there, like these qualified retirement plans, all these 1031s, like these confusing things that aren't necessarily like tools I would use out of the tool bag, but they just kind of befuddle things. And it's a lot of noise out there that, to me, things are very simple. Invest in good deals, maybe do real estate professional status if your AGI is over 340. If not, try and mitigate your taxes as much as possible with the passive losses to your passive income. Do some infinite banking and then get your net worth over 3-4 million. And at that point, maybe get out of value add deals and go to more endgame type of investment strategies.
Well, like what?
Things where you're investing with more institutional operators. It's going to be lower returns, but the nice thing about institutional operators is that they're a little bit more stable. Of course, you don't want to go back to the stock market. Well, maybe you do, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of my idea personally, right? Like at some point, I want to get to a point where I go back to that Wall Street garbage, because although it's consistently bad, at least it's consistent. And it's something that my family can unravel when I'm dead, just to not leave them in a pickle. In conjunction, people talk about like triple net leases and stuff like that. I'm not a huge fan of those anymore. I'd rather be in apartments. I just know that more. Because, like a Walgreens, the Amazon model with the pharmacies, they're going to Walgreens, triple nets aren't the most safest thing in the world anymore, right. I think. And that's where, if you talk to a lot of family office folks, this is where you start to play these war games and, kind of sharpshoot your investment strategy. And in the beginning, you're focusing on a lot of like, you're putting all your eggs in one basket because you have to, because you can't get penetration otherwise. And that means buying one rental property, then buying a handful of rental properties. Then you start to diversify a little bit more by going into a bunch of syndication deals. But at some point, when you get endgame, which I define as $4 to $5 million for most people, right, which provides a pretty decent cash flow stream of 20 grand per month, you start to look for these other type of hedges. Another idea would be like IULs. IULs are kind of a scam. I think a lot of people try and sell them, but they're the right tool for extremely high net worth people who just want consistency. But yeah, if your net worth is under a couple $1 million, I wouldn't mess with those things one bit, and just kind of run away from the person selling you that garbage. But like these are the things that I'm kind of working on today personally, like these more end game type of things, where if I had a brain tumor, and died in 2 weeks, like I wouldn't leave my family in a predicament, right? Like, cause I get it. Like the stuff I do now, like, I don't have my wife co-sign on this stuff because it's a waste of time explaining this stuff. And maybe that's not a good attitude, but like, I can't imagine them. I mean, sure, they'll get a big payout because of the whole life insurance thing. And that's another story, but like, I'm probably more good dead than I am alive. But then again, like if I'm not here, like where do we put this $100,000 into this deal, that deal, like who to trust? I mean, my spouse and family don't know what to do.
Right. I mean, I think a really interesting point that you brought up there is that there is a lot of noise out there, and especially in the investment space, and really a lot of the things that are flashy, that are kind of coming across your radar, are quasi scammy or just overly complex, or it's being sold by somebody. I think you mentioned this too, that's just looking for a commission. And, for getting into the game and being smart, and maybe your first handful of deals, like it should just be simple, right? Like you don't need to have an overly complex tax strategy. You don't need to be looking at, 3 different layers of how you move your money through a deal. Like it should just be, hey, find a good deal, good operator, and we invest. But when you start doing your research on passive investing, there is so much information out there that it can be really, really distracting. And is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're unfortunately having, to unlock a lot of, if you think of it like a video game, you're trying to unlock all these tax strategies and then, save more money or make more money to put into infinite banking. You're going to have to invest, right? That's unfortunately the prerequisite to this world. And that's where a lot of the landmines are in terms of people, right? Working with the wrong people. So this is why I tell people, we'll focus on that stuff first, right? Because that's where you're going to get your leg blown off or lose 50 grand, 100 grand here or there first. Make sure you invest with proven people who, people who are unbiased sources invested with in the past and had a good experience with. Once you start investing, that's when you get the tax, you get the passive activity losses. Hopefully they're doing a cost seg, or even if they're not doing a cost seg, right? The regular depreciation is fine. That should create a passive forward or suspended passive loss. And now you start to implement these tax strategies, but without going into deals, you don't get that stuff. Or even if you're investing in the low rental properties, you don't have nearly as much depreciation with that type of stuff. But that's the hardest part, I think, and that what unlocks this world. Like once you get to that point, now you kind of open up into these other things like the qualified retirement plans, different self-directed IRAs, ways to get around 1031 exchanges, deferred sales, and then other legal products Like, like we're beyond the simple LLC or like the Wyoming LLC. Like I'm talking about some of these more like irrevocable trust kind of setups. What you start to realize is a lot of these types of setups, like they're just, you have to ask what it is, right? Like, is this a grantor trust and who is the trustee, right? How is this set up and is it irrevocable, right? This is how you got to start to learn these terms, because what you'll start to realize is somebody, very smart lawyer came along and patented the damn thing, kind of like a computer code, and called it something cool, right? And then now you're talking to your other peers and colleagues about something cool trust, right? With Dynasty Trust or whatever. I want to be careful not to say something cool, like and like get yelled at by somebody, or I don't want to piss off a lawyer, right? But a lot of these things are kind of patented things, and some of them are the same exact thing, right? And that's what's confusing. And you start to learn these things by the damn marketed term and not what it is, right? Like, is this a defector trust, right? That's what it is, but you could be called the universal greatest trust that you ever want, right?
Right.
Right. Same thing with the retirement plan. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with that type of stuff. And, the easiest way, or the straightest line to me that isn't always like the easy way, is to build relationships with other passive accredited investors, kind of piece together this mystery amongst yourselves. So unfortunately, you're going to have to get outside your computer seat and interact with other people.
Yeah. I think, that is the key, is you've got to figure out, and you've got to interact, and you've got to build relationships for this to be successful. And that goes for everything that you do when you're investing passively. Who do you trust for it to be your attorney, right? Are they just taking your business because they want it, or do they actually know what they're doing? They put your documents together wrong, like this thing could completely unravel on you. So, there's just so many things that you've got to spend a little bit of time on. And it all boils down to relationships. And then, the good news is that it's all been done before, right? Like this is not a new trail. People have done it. You just need to find some good people that you feel comfortable, that have walked the path before you, and then just walk in their path. Who do they use? Who do they talk with? Like, there's a lot of great things. But Lane, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. I always like to finish the show with a little bit of gratitude, because none of us got where we are all by ourselves. And we were just talking about building relationships. I want to give you an opportunity to give somebody a shout out publicly that's kind of helped you or given you a leg up along the way.
Yeah, I think I'd like to show gratitude for that somebody who like pulls their head out of their high paid job and realize that maybe there's a different way, and has the cojones to like not just kind of stay in their comfort zone of that. And there is a different way of doing things. And, the people who've gone down the path of implementing a lot of these strategies and kind of pay it forward some other way, right? That's what it's kind of all about. I don't like to do Habitat for Humanity. You're not going to find me working on a Saturday building a house. That's just not my highest and best use. My thought was always kind of teach people how to do this type of stuff so that they can go build those houses on Saturday, so I don't have to do it, right? So that they can get financially free. So, everybody kind of has a different point on the whole spectrum in terms of how do they add value to society, right? Like, I think people have to find their own. If not, go build some houses on Saturday. Yes.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you like what you heard, Lane obviously is with simplepassivecashflow.com, and we'll have a link in the show notes as well. Lane, thank you so much for taking the time.
All right. Thanks, Shake. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.
Thanks. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Limited Partner Podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review. If there's any reason you wouldn't leave us a 5-star review, please email me at jw@jakewiley.com. Your feedback is always appreciated. The show is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the limited partner community. It's a community where limited partners can come together to learn about what best in class looks like, and opportunities, and most importantly, a place to connect. There is nothing out there like this, so head over to thelimitedpartner.com and sign up. We'll see you next time.